Okay, thank you. The first policy session today is proposed board order adopting process, procedures, and protocols for the board. Stephen Madcourt, County Counsel, will present.
Thank you, Gary. Good morning, Commissioners. It's me again. This is a revisit of something that the board has heard and discussed and considered on at least 3 prior occasions. But what you have before you are 2 versions of proposed board process, procedures, and protocols. And you will recall that previously, I think it might have been the chair, I'm not entirely sure, but this board had said that they're only really going to be on board if the vote was unanimous on this. So what you have is 2 sets of proposals. You have an Exhibit 1, and you also have an Exhibit 2, which is what I call the minority report. And yesterday afternoon, I provided you with a email which has a comparison of the 2. And I would submit that it's minor differences between the 2 versions. And I'll point out the more obvious ones in a sec. But you have 2 things. You have the order adopting it. And the reason that we have this order is what it sets forth is the source of the board's authority and what the board resorts to when making decision-making. It's performance clackamus, it's the goals you've adopted, it's spirit, it's Chapter 2 of the code itself. It basically identifies the source of the board's authority and also the objectives of the board: county governance, swift, prompt, timely, transparent decision-making, and things along those lines. So the 2 proposals on the board order, those are substantially the same, but for one minor difference, and that is with the Exhibit 2, it eliminates a section on the board's performance clackamus goals of honor, utilize, promote, and invest in natural resources, grow a vibrant economy. That's in Exhibit 1. It is not in the minority report. The minority report was compiled after discussions with Commissioner Savas and Commissioner Scholl. And like I said, it doesn't deviate greatly from the Exhibit 1, which is the original draft proposal. But let me point out the area where it is different, and that is in, if you're looking at Exhibit 2 Minority Report, page 9 of 11, it has A, the board is self-governing and may take adverse action against any commissioner. Such action may include, but not be limited to, a public reprimand, an admonishment, a censure, removal or reassignment of liaison duties, and other actions as deemed warranted by the board. If any adverse action is formally undertaken by the board concerning any commissioner, that matter shall be revisited by the board for a reevaluation or reconsideration after 180 days. That's language that is in the minority report. Also, sub B in that same section, if a workplace-related complaint is filed against any commissioner, the matter will be referred to County Human Resources, where it will be investigated and handled in a manner comparable to the process set forth in County Employment Policy and Practice number 2. So those are the major differences between 1 and 2 in terms of the exhibits that you have before you. There are other minor kind of grammatical changes. And maybe if you want, maybe Commissioners Scholl and Savas could speak to those if you so desired. And there are, again, some other relatively minor minor changes between the 2 that aren't necessarily substantive in nature. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have with respect to these. I do know that it's been a long process, dragged out. Some of you are supportive of it. Some of you say it's kind of frustrating having these conversations. This is meant to guide the board and staff, not necessarily to bind you and to be rigid and inflexible. It's basically what you do right now. It's just put to a document. It's in writing for the most part. Exhibit 1. The minority report expands on it a bit, but even that still sets forth some parameters for the board to follow moving forward. Happy to answer any questions that the commissioners might have.
I do, and I have many comments on that. I would disagree with county council's interpretation that this is what we do now. There are some glaring, in my opinion, glaring additions to this, but we have a couple commissioners in the queue right now. I will remind commissioners, we must all agree on this or it's not going to work. And we can talk about that today. Two commissioners, Commissioner Savas, you're up.
Yeah, well, mine really wasn't a question, it's more of a, just going to give added context to build on what Mr. Madcore was just speaking to. So if you may recall, we had a first cut of this that was presented by the attorney, Mr. Madcore, and then Commissioner Smith and I were the only two that had made comments or write-ups or markups on that. Commissioner Smith first, and then I made some comments, and then he added those additions. And then there was a third, I believe, was Commissioner Smith, which is what we have before us today, with a couple more modifications. And my goal all along in this was to just add, you know, whether it was different colored, whether it's some red, some blue, some green, whatever, to identify who was making the suggestions. We had one document as opposed to 3 or 4 here. So it makes it more confusing and harder to track. But I do want to just say that that's the context of how we got here. As far as my individual comments about what's before us today, I have one other, and that is that in my efforts, and maybe Mr. Madcore, maybe this is a question for Mr. Madcore, he can help explain this, but it's my general understanding that when we are working on something like this and we're wordsmithing and we're trying to get things right, I know we're all taxed, we all have a lot of things to do. We rely on our policy advisors to help carry things forward and convey to the administrator, Mr. Madcore, what is we want to see tweaked or worked on to marry these two. My goal was to marry them again. That didn't happen, unfortunately. And so I think that's part of the reason this has been a little bit laborious and it's kind of extended on for a lot longer period of time. But is there any protocol that we need to adjust to make sure that, you know, if I ask my policy advisor, Everett, in this case, on my behalf to, you know, tweak on something or look at language on that he can do that and he can communicate with you and get feedback on that?
That's pretty much what happened, though, correct?
Not quite.
Okay.
And it didn't happen on the short-term rentals either.
It's difficult when one commissioner starts directing staff to do something. Usually staff is going to respond to the quorum of the commission, directing staff to undertake a particular task.
Okay, well, these were edits that were going to be, the ownership would be from in this case, for myself, and identified as such, not changes that supersede or weigh on the entire commission or anyone's work. It was just something to present that was, again, I had ownership of, I took responsibility for. But my question is more to the point is that if I ask my policy advisor to reach out to you for a detail or two and spend 15 minutes, is there a protocol we need to enhance to make sure that happens?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Okay. I think you had indicated to me recently that you would have liked. We'll talk about it offline.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
For now.
Okay.
I'm done.
Commissioner Schrader and then Commissioner Fisher.
So,
Sorry.
It's okay.
I thought I was Commissioner
so
Schrader
we've been
again.
through this again and again and again. And we need to follow them if we move ahead with them, number one. Okay, and we can have it on paper and then it can just sit somewhere and, you know, and then we do our commissioner thing because we're human. Okay, it's the way it goes. The main bone of contention is this, as far as I understand it, and this is page 5 of 11. Okay, so the chair will establish the agenda for each meeting of the board. Okay. 2 or more commissioners may call a meeting or place any item on the agenda of the meeting of the Board of County Commissioners, either directly or over the objection of the chair. So I think that the bone of contention here is call a meeting. What do we mean by that? Because usually, you know, when we meet together. And we do have the ability already, right, for two commissioners to ask for something to be on the agenda, and it happens. So what's
Correct.
this meeting business? Because that's going to cause, okay, look, in my opinion, that's going to cause a whole cluster of problems, because everybody's going to think somebody else is doing something, you know, nefarious, or they're just, I'm just going to be honest here. That's kind of, and it's because we need the speed of trust with one another. And if we don't trust one another is when all this stuff starts to happen. If we trust one another, you can just have two people put something on the agenda, call it good, and hash it out. So gentlemen, could you tell me, I mean, do we really need that? That we, like, two of the commissioners has the ability to call a meeting, and then who goes to that meeting? Is it just the two commissioners? Is it a meeting of all five commissioners? Does the chair have any authority over running that meeting? To me, it just brings up a whole load of, you know, issues that are just going to probably put us at odds with each other, to be perfectly direct. But
I would agree with Commissioner Schrader on that. I have a lot of trouble with that. Like what happened today, we had Commissioner Scholl wanted something on issues for next week. Commissioner Savas, we did that. You don't even need two commissioners to have something put on the agenda. I do object to two commissioners setting meetings. It's not defined. I won't approve of this. I will be a no vote on this if that language remains. Anything else, Commissioner Schrader?
yeah, I just want to say, folks, we have to get over this. It's just my observation, in my opinion. The chair is not the all-powerful chair, okay? The chair has to work with four other people. We sometimes think that it's more, there's more, quote-unquote, whatever the power is there than when we think it is. And in essence, we all have the same level of authority other than setting an agenda, and we already have a process for putting something on the agenda. So we don't need to make this some kind of a power struggle. I, for one, have no desire to be chair ever again. I've done it twice. I'm done. I'm okay with vice chair. The chair, in my opinion, also gets to basically have all the tomatoes thrown directly at them at multiple times because they, in a sense, whether that's codified or not, they become the primary spokesperson for the board. They do. Usually, all the media stuff will go to the chair first. All the, the letters, well, sign on behalf of the board, da-da-da-da-da. That's okay with me. So, what's the problem? Okay, so here's my question as friends, okay, as colleagues and friends, all right? What's the problem we're trying to fix here? Because if it's just the fact that we have different personalities, that's not going to work.
So can I respond? You're looking at me,
Yeah,
you
I'm
asked the
looking at you
question,
because
so-
you're my friend,
Right, right.
and you've been working on this, and I'm not.
So this
just-
gets to my earlier point. I was just trying to point out that there was basically a communication breakdown between, trying to put this all together in one document.
Right.
And part of that breakdown may have been that expressing the ideas that were consistent with the ordinance in place, what the ordinance
Okay.
says in place, and the meaning, the intent of what the ordinance is, was to basically put clarification as to what that is or isn't. So this exact language, word for word, I don't have ownership in other than the concept. But it was my hope, again, that this would go from my PA to the attorney to be wedded or melded in, mixed into the one document that's consistent with the ordinance. So I don't know exactly how that came out to be, but I see your point. I don't necessarily disagree, but maybe Mr. Madcore can explain what the ordinance actually says about that. Because if we asked to have something put on the agenda, and here was my concern I take ownership of, if we asked to have something put on the agenda, but it doesn't make it to the agenda for months and months and months, then the ordinance is basically useless, right? If two commissioners ask for something, then it takes months to get it on the agenda. So what does the ordinance say, or how is this inconsistent with the ordinance, Mr. Madcore?
It's consistent with the ordinance.
Thank you. So there you go, Martha.
So it's a timing issue. So that's a behavioral issue too, though. You know what I mean? If,
Well,
If we want to go to the voters, we can go to the voters and change it. And I'd also like to talk about some other changes as well.
so can't we just have a trust agreement with one another that, when two commissioners ask, it isn't, put on the back burner. Can't we just do it that way and trust the chair to do that? I mean, is that what we're trying to fix
A
here,
point of
guys?
clarification, I'm going to interject here.
I'm not I'm trying to solve problems.
No, I
Yeah.
know you are, and I appreciate that. This issue has been scheduled for meetings, and not all 5 commissioners were present when those meetings were scheduled. And I took it off the agenda because not all 5 commissioners were here. So if somebody thinks that something nefarious was done, that it didn't come up timely, commissioners just show up on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and you'll get the work done. And I have said that consistently since I started as chair. There are some issues that take all 5 of us, some issues it's not necessary to take all 5 of us. But finally, we had an opportunity where all 5 of us are present, and that's why we're here today. Any further discussion from Schrader or Savas?
Well, then I would say, okay, if that's the issue, is that there's some things you want to make sure everybody's here for, how can we craft something like that on issues? I mean, it's always at the discretion of the chair, but if the chair is saying, okay, this one, yeah, you do want to have 5 people. How do you make that happen in language, or how do you set up that expectation? Okay, that, I don't know, maybe what you do is you say something like, well, of issues of critical board performance or critical board relationship, I don't know. 5 commissioners need to be present when we discuss issues. I mean, I don't know how you do that. I'm not a lawyer.
I think that would be very hard to define.
Yeah.
By the way, I also seek counsel of Stephen Madcore, Gary Schmidt, and other staff before I make a decision. I think they can attest to that fact. Correct, Gary?
Yes.
Yeah, I seek their counsel on what's best for the board, what's the best for Clackamas County going forward. I've always operated with that in mind. There are certain things, certain items in this that I have questions about. Commissioner Fisher?
So I think I'm capturing what happened. This was what we were working from, which is online. And then, Stephen, you provided this red line version of changes to that with conversation of Commissioner Savas and Commissioner Scholl. Do I have that correct?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Okay, I just probably needed that at the very, very beginning of our session, but I wanted to make sure I understood that. So that was really my question. But I have a comment now, because what I like about this is that it doesn't limit what's in the code. It just provides some clarification. So Commissioner Schrader, what I would say to I don't think we need to be looking for, what do we call zebras and,
Yeah, that's kind of what I.
because it's in the code that any 2 commissioners can call an emergency meeting. Any 2 commissioners can do that. So having that in this, I don't think it hurts. I don't like the way that this is worded. I just don't like this over the objection of the chair and any of that. There could be very good reasons why 2 commissioners might need to call a meeting. I can't think of one right now. Or we could leave it out entirely and just know
Follow the
that
code.
in the code
Yeah.
that that's an option if that rare circumstance were ever to come up. I don't really care. It depends on what we want to have this document be.
Thank you. So,
Because
Mr.
to function,
Yeah.
we need to work together, and I don't have Chair Smith put stuff on, we say this is a concern, we talk about it, it happens. I can't even think of an example that has not happened. So I can't see that this would be personal.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to say. That's what I'm worried about here, okay? Because we're human. I'm not saying we're bad people or I'm just trying to say we are human. And we say and do things, and it's just who we are. Is that in the code, Mr. Madcore? I'm sorry.
I'm
I
sorry,
should know
Commissioner,
that.
what?
Is
What?
that in the code? It is already in the code that 2 commissioners can call a meeting? Or is it 2 commissioners can?
Over the objection of the chair is in the code.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Yes, it is.
I'd have to pull the language.
I would like county
Yeah, so
council to
let's
make
check
sure.
on that.
Yeah,
Let's check
I'd
on
have to pull. It certainly says that the chair sets the agenda, presides over meetings, and it does say something that 2 other commissioners can get something on the agenda. I don't know if it has the objection language in there.
On the agenda, and that has always been that way.
Yeah.
Also, I would like, commissioners, if you want something on the agenda, it would be really nice if you would let the chair know. And that's the communication breakdown that I see from two people on the end that quite are trying to do something that I feel is an assault on me. Let me know what you want on the agenda. Oftentimes, there's a circuitous route. One commissioner goes to MAGCOR, one commissioner goes to Schmidt, and I don't even know why you want it on the agenda, because I would like a heads up. If I'm leading the meeting on that issue, I need to know what the concerns are. I'm not going to deny anybody, but I certainly need to know what the issue is to bring it to the attention to have a meeting. Schrader?
So I just want to say that's what I'm talking about. We're human. And sometimes we look for zebras where there aren't any really zebras there. And all of us have to be cognizant of that, including the chair, whoever the chair is in the future now, whatever. So it sounds like, again, to me, this is a courtesy issue. And if there is explicit language, Mr. Madcore, in the code, as Sonia, that's what you said, it's explicit, that two members can call an emergency meeting. But then the expectation is that all five of us are here, correct?
Yeah, well, it's a meeting,
Okay.
and we
Has to
have
be,
our.
yeah.
Has to be all five
duties.
of us. Okay. But so if that's in the code, why do we have over the objection of the chair? The chair can't object.
That's in the code.
I will cite from the code itself,
Yeah,
Chapter
Oh, I don't know. You've read it.
211070.
I will, shh.
The chair shall establish the agenda for each meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Two or more commissioners may place any item on the agenda of a meeting of the Board of County Commissioners over the objection of the chair.
It's in the ordinance.
But it doesn't say a commissioner, two commissioners will call a meeting.
Meeting,
It will
yeah.
have an agenda item at a meeting. That's the clarification that I'm seeking today.
Yeah, I think what it is, we do have the meeting, but it's like you can't call the meeting, but you can put it on, an issue on over the objection of the board.
Correct.
That's the nuance we're talking about here.
That's the
Okay,
nuance.
Does that make sense? It's a nuance.
Well, I think it's presumed that if we put it on the agenda, it gets on the agenda, and not all requests have been made and put on the agenda. And so I think that was the concern, is that
Yeah.
it's not just that it goes on to the agenda when, and the when was, we done it, I can't remember exactly what the issue was last year, but I do remember Commissioner Smith saying, we're going to do all those things after X. We need to wait till X, and X is passed, whatever that was. I didn't really I wasn't prepared to recall all that stuff and talk about that this much detail. But I do. It really begs the
Yeah.
reasoning, and I think there's some historical context here. So back in 2008 and 9, when there was a committee put together to look at changing the commission from 3 commissioners to 5, this type thing came up, and this is a product of that. And the issue was going to the elected chair, which I was not in favor of then. I'm still not in favor of now, and never in between have been in favor of the elected chair. But this was a measurement. This was a tool to make sure that and I wasn't here when this was written. When that ordinance was written, I wasn't on the board. Okay, this happened before I got here. But the concern is that issues would come, and the chair couldn't dismiss them, that the chair would put something on the agenda, which means in a meeting, and a meeting would happen in a reasonable amount of time, not months and months and months. This is a great example, Chair, of something that, sure, there have been some absences, and we've been here and there, but there's been plenty. We've been here for, all together as 5, for a lot more meetings than we have otherwise. So I would just beg to use this issue itself as a reasoning for if you want to change the ordinance or put in some wording in there within a reasonable amount of time of X weeks or months. But this came up well over a year ago, and it came up as a result of people noticing, frankly, about the board rules, not about this ordinance, but the board rules about how we behave and the decorum or the lack of decorum. And are we following Robert's Rules of Orders or are we not? When someone has the floor and speaks, they have the floor, and Robert's Rules are sturgis. When you have the floor, you have the floor. When that's taken away from you and interrupted, that's not Robert's rule. That's not proper rules. That's disrespectful. And so, if I can, I want to switch gears to the order that was changed that you got with It reads, which is crossed out, it reads right today, which was presented in the material that Mr. Madcore sent out, is crossed out, whereas is the intent and desire of the Board of County Commissioners to conduct its business in an orderly, timely, professional, equitable, and respectful manner. That was what was crossed out. It was replaced with, whereas the Board of County Commissioners is charged with conducting county governance in an orderly, timely, efficient, transparent, equitable, professional fashion. Okay? Well, I think that the word timely and efficient relates to what we just talked about. When someone asks for something on the agenda that is timely and is efficient, not what we have here today. But more importantly, Mr. Madcore, I have a question for you. I'm struck that we would actually take the words out, respectful manner, and how we conduct business and treat each other. We would actually strike those words. I'm actually bothered by that.
I don't know who struck those words.
And I don't know either. So that's why I'm asking Mr. Madcore the question. So what meaning is, what meaning does the word fashion have? It says professional fashion. What's the terminology, whether ordinance or public or government or legal? What's the definition of fashion?
A process, a manner, a procedure.
So if it's fashionable to be late, I think that's the first time I heard the word fashionably in government. Someone's fashionably late to a meeting, or they're fashionably prolonged in their conversation, that's acceptable without any changes? It seems if that is contrary to respectful manner, I'd like to have the words respectful manner put in there because I think it's important. That's what this whole issue came about, is how we treat each other and what the rules are and interruptions and who has the floor. That's how this all got started over a year ago.
Okay, Commissioner Savas, we understand your objections. I have some points to be made. Is there a question of Mr. Madcore that needs to be answered or not? I don't think so. Okay, now, Commissioners, every week in your email, you get what is called a green sheet. How many Commissioners read it?
I do.
Okay, on that green sheet are meetings scheduled for about 3 or 4 months out. There are also some blank dates on that sometimes we have to hold time for department business or an emergency that may come up. So if any commissioners look at the green sheet, you don't see your issue on that, it is incumbent upon you to let me know and Gary know that you want it on there. There is no, what can I say? There is no plot to try to eliminate one commissioner's request for information or meetings over the other. Now, I've gone through this and I have some questions. On page 2 of the board order of, in the manner, we struck out performance Clackamas County plan. Why was that, Stephen?
Chair, are you referring to page 2 of the so-called minority report?
Is that what it is?
Of
Because
this
that
one.
doesn't say that on here. That's the problem.
The board order itself, the draft
See,
board
I
order.
have 2 minority reports.
So, yeah,
I have 2, and one, so I have Exhibit 2, Minority Report, Exhibit 2. I don't have on my information, it doesn't say 1 or 2. They both say 2, and that's the confusion.
Well, there's the board packet,
Page 1.
has a policy session worksheet. It has a board order in Exhibit 1. It also has a board order that says Exhibit 2 Minority Report at the top. And also the upper right, it says Exhibit 2 Minority Report. It also says it in the footer as well. So the Minority Report does have the excluded language of the Performance Clackamas. And the Minority Report is language that was arrived at after consultation with Commissioner Savas, Commissioner Shull, and I believe Everett was actually part of that conversation as well. So if there are questions about the content of the Minority Report, which does exclude the Performance Clackamas component, and the Minority Report also excluded the respectful language as well. So that's not my doing. That was a result of the Minority Report. Those were your changes.
I don't recall, I differ there. That's not
Okay.
my memory.
Okay, so, that's not your memory. So we don't know why the Performance Clackamas was eliminated. Do we know why, Gary?
I think it was my recollection was it was recommendation of legal counsel that it be struck because it was redundant. It was already spelled out when it's already a document and would be added as an addendum to all this work, as was the spirit and all this other work. So these would be addendums to the document that it didn't have to be, it'd be redundant otherwise to have everything spelled out in there. We could have added and added and added, but that was legal counsel's recommendation, which I agreed.
Okay, all right. Now, on page 3, it says 2 commissioners may call an emergency meeting under B1. Also that's on page 3, also on page 5, under 2D, top of page 5, it says 2 commissioners may call a meeting. I think that should be stricken.
Where are you again? I'm sorry, Chair.
There's page 3 and
I'm
Page
lost.
3,
page 5.
under B.
Page 3 of 11?
Page 3 of 11, middle of the page, number B, special meetings, number 1, strike out 2 commissioners call an emergency meeting. On page 5, at the top of the page, under D, 2 commissioners may call an emergency meeting. Look, I can foresee that any 2 commissioners that want to do something with policy are going to be calling meetings, and staff may not be prepared to handle that. We call meetings, look, there is a huge process. Anybody who has served as vice chair, Commissioner Schrader knows this. There is a huge process to prepare for these meetings. Staff has background information in anticipation of our questions. I will have some questions during our agenda setting meetings. Commissioner Schrader may have some, but staff tries to prepare the best they can on this. There is a process that we go through, and it's very important. Under quorum, a quorum consists of 3 commissioners. Why do we need to define approval of 3 votes, Stephen, to establish a quorum?
Clarity.
Okay, that's kind of the rule of the land in every single board, commission, or legislative body, but that's okay. I was just curious about that. Also, I want to go to the page 10. The board is a self-governing and may take adverse action against any commissioner. I have trouble with that language. An adverse action based on what criteria? There is no criteria spelled out for us to take an adverse action. I mean, does somebody disagree with what I may have said in a very private manner or on a social media account? I think there needs to be criteria set to take adverse action. Also, it said be re-evaluated or reconsidered after 180 days. Why can't it be shorter? It may be 90 days. It may be 60 days. So I think those two pieces of language need to be identified. Also, you want to throw out Robert's Rules of Order and insert a standard code or a parliamentary procedure by Sturgis. Look, when I came on board, I established a criteria that we would be disciplined and to conduct the meeting with Robert's Rules of Order. I am sorry if one or more of the commissioners disagree with that. I feel that this is very much an affront against my ability to run the meeting and establish Robert Rules of Order. I think you're most definitely poking at the chair right now to run the meetings as outlined in county code in the best possible measure. Now, the Oregon legislature, I will refer to them from where I come. That is probably, regardless of who's in charge, it really is one of the most disciplined bodies that you will find. They establish at the very beginning of their sessions every 2 years the House rules, the Senate rules. If the House rules are silent, Robert's Rules is the backup. It's very simple. So when I came on, we had county code. I established Robert's Rules of Orders, but also the chair also has the ability to conduct the meeting, end the debate for time, and continue on with the meeting. That's the way it is. And unless we overrule this and go to the vote of the people, I don't see that changing anytime soon. So that's the way it is unless these items are taken care of. I am not in support of this today. And in order to this to be effective, as I have stated many times before, we need a 5 affirmative vote for this to go. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, so let me just address that the change from Robert's Rules to Sturgis is in no way, couldn't be farther from the truth, any attack or poke to the chair. So please dismiss that right away and.
So why change it? Then why change it?
If I may.
I know, but why change it then, Commissioner Savas?
That's what I'm going to explain. See, I'm getting interrupted again. The purpose of that was because everyone said Robert's Rules of Order is too difficult, onerous, and so on. And yet there's lots of different versions of Robert's Rules of Order. And to your point, actually, Chair, as far when you mentioned the legislature, there was a version of Sturgis that was actually approved for a number of years to be used as a model for local governments. And the Attorney General's office issued a version of that. And so I thought simply because Sturgis is less challenged with all the deviations and onerous and how difficult, where you need to stand to get recognized or speak and all of that. You know, I mean, there's a lot of things in Robert's Rules that are just onerous. So that was simply the rationale for that. But let's go back a little bit and talk about, and I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
I believe it was it's to come back to me, but when we went from 3 to 5 commissioners, and it was established that the role of the chair and the role of that's what it was, then the role spelled in ordinance of 2 commissioners to call for, or any of the things that we talked about, including the last one, Chair, that you brought up with regard to the last one here that you raised here on page, was it page 5? Not page 10, but what was the other one you raised, Chair? Page 5?
3, 5, and 10.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which one you're talking about.
Yeah. So a lot of these things actually were predate this board, including Sturgis and all these things. So this is nothing personal. This is nothing personal about any one of us or anything else. These are all things that were established before we got here. The challenge with the getting things on the agenda has been exacerbated, and we all agreed we'll give it a shot. And that significant change was this. Our Tuesday work sessions started off in the morning, and we went into the afternoon, and we got most of our work sessions done. And we had Wednesdays for overflow, where we would spend usually a half a Wednesday. Sometimes we would spend all day Wednesday, but we had the time. Okay, now our days are over at noon, our work sessions over at noon, whether it's Tuesday or Wednesday. So we now have the same load, if not more, and half the time that we once had. So that is part of the reason why I think this is more of an issue now, is that whether it's the green sheet, which, by the way, not all things are on the green sheet, and I would just say that because I've been watching it, and as you stated, a lot of them don't have dates. So there's a lot of uncertainty, more uncertainty than I'm accustomed to in my 12 years of tenure here. So I did want to say that I had one other thing, but when that comes back to me, I'll turn my light back on. So I'll stop there.
Okay. So regarding Wednesday meetings, as a chair, I have the right to set the meeting agenda, and I did that based on the fact that Metch staff has come to me and said, look, it is too much for us to prepare Tuesday. They give orders into a policy session. This was motivated by staff preparation as well, correct, Gary?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Schrader.
So, here's what I see as the issue. one of the things I learned in my NACO leadership class, that I took recently was we always have to believe positive intent. So I go into everything believing every one of my colleagues has, positive.
Assume positive intent.
Assume positive intent. And that was said again and again and again in our leadership class as well. Not just what we have here, but that was like one of the consistent themes. So I believe positive intent of every single commissioner I work with. It's just the way it is. I will always believe you're working for the good of the county. It seems to me that we just need to work individually on the speed of trust, okay? All right, we got to get there, and that what we're talking about here is timing issues for placement on the agenda. So maybe, Gary, you could help us figure out with the chair, okay, maybe we can work on the timing issues, okay, on when two commissioners ask for something to be put on the agenda, that there's a certain window when we kind of have to move that forward. But I don't want to me, this is about how we work efficiently. It's not about an authority issue, okay? I believe that the chair has embedded authority for certain things. It's just the way it is, okay? I'm not going to challenge that authority in any way, shape, or form. That's why we have a chair, okay? But if it's a timing issue, why don't we just work on our procedures internally to get things in a more timely manner? And if we have to codify that, maybe you could talk about what would that look reasonably for this whole group with the green sheet? How would we manage that? How would that work? And if we want to say, if we want to do something generic, like in issues, two commissioners place on it, it comes back in a reasonable time frame, let's define what that time frame may be. I'm trying to come up to a solution because I understand what you're saying, but these issues are going to keep going on no matter what, no matter who's chair and whoever is on this commission, because of how we treat each other as people and humans. Okay, it's just human nature. So I don't believe that the chair is embedded with the authority over everything. I don't think we have equal authority, but there has to be some order and some procedural discipline in how we react to getting things on the agenda, and that's what I think we should see this as. Okay, does that make sense?
Gary, you have your light on.
Okay?
Yes.
Respect, you left out respect.
And respect, no.
That's
Well,
what we need to work on.
I would also believe positive intent and believe we respect one another as with the way we need to. And sometimes, okay, sometimes we're going to get mad and not be respectful. Oh, well, what do? The next day you come in and you just give each other a hug and you move on. Right, really? Right? What are you going to do? Get over it. Get over it, people. Just get over it.
Gary, you had your light on. You wanted to make a comment?
Yes, Chair Smith, Vice Chair Schrader, myself, Stephen Madcore, we meet every Thursday for an agenda-setting meeting. We look at every request by commissioners. We see what departments have requested, what Tootie, as the chair, would like to see on the agenda. Tootie always listens to my advice and Stephen's advice, and I want to take responsibility. I sometimes say, Chair, staff's not ready for this yet. We need more time. Commissioners, you know this, board-staff relationships, we got to be aligned here. You could ask for 1 million policy sessions, but if staff's not able to produce what you need, we can't do it. So we have to be aligned, and that's why I do ask the chair, can we pause on this or hold on this until staff has the capacity to deliver what the board wants? So I am also responsible if you feel something's delayed, and ask me, I'll tell you, or I'll be more open in public to tell you that. But that's the reason. So it is a very collaborative relationship, and I appreciate that, Chair. But she always asks input from me and Stephen, and we give it to her on timing. Thank you.
Departments have timing issues on items of policy that need to come forward. And many times, I will defer to the departments to take care of the county business where commissioners don't. And I will say, being as chair, I have learned about the great depth of knowledge of our departments and able to bring items forward. And the consent agenda is just the tip of the iceberg. The consent agenda is just spending. So I've had an item that I wanted to bring up for 4 months now, and it keeps getting delayed and delayed and the delayed, and that's looking at our road tax, our county road tax, and quite possibly developing some diversion routes or targeting them or making aware. I've wanted that ever since the tolling issue came up. I've wanted that for a year and a half because I believe that policy needs to be updated, okay? That was something that's near and dear to my heart because I live in South County, where most of the population comes to Clackamas County. Look, the roads are bad, the roads are bad. So that's just one issue that I haven't been able to do. So Commissioners, if you think you're slighted, you're not slighted by any means. So sometimes we all don't always get what we want. Commissioner Shaw.
Yes, that's true. We all can't get what we want. We have to compromise. Now, being the newbie up here, I know we've been working on this for well over a year. And so it's going to take compromise to get a document done that you can get a 5-0 vote on. That's going to take extreme compromise. I like the Exhibit 2 minority report. I like the idea of returning the word respectful that Paul has mentioned. I like the idea of having something in here that speaks specifically to no interruptions once a commissioner's got the floor. I would agree, I would compromise with the Chair Smith to remove on section special meetings, subparagraph 1, remove the words "or 2 commissioners." I would agree with Commissioner Smith under notice and agenda, subparagraph D, to remove the words "2 or more commissioners call a meeting." That's a compromise. And also on the last page that talks about actions against any commissioner, on the very last sentence of that, I would add the words or reconsider after or not greater than 180 days. So those are some compromises that I would be willing to accept in the spirit of getting this document done so you can get your 5-0 vote.
Okay, thank you for that. Also, the chair reserves the right in any of this, and this needs to be stated in these rules as well. The chair reserves the right to conduct the meetings as to time. And when one commissioner tends to dominate the conversation with their philosophy or their belief system, I do have the right to interject and call for a vote and end the debate. And that's why I like Robert's Rules of Order, because we cannot debate ad nauseum every single issue that comes forward. We need to make a decision and go forward. So I do think that the chair will run the meeting for time. We have an agenda, and it's set on time, and this meeting will end at 11:30 today. And then we're going to start the other issue that's come forward. So commissioners, we have very little time to continue this. Commissioner Fisher, do you have your light on? No?
I don't know why I do.
All right. Oh, Commissioner Scholl,
How'd that happen?
you just turned it on.
Yeah,
Okay, sorry.
I got special powers.
You must.
On that, Chair Smith, one way we can reduce the amount of time required at the dais for discussing an issue is simply by meeting in the offices here in the building prior to the meeting to hash out some of these things.
I would agree.
And so
I'm
there's
in
a
here-
solution to that problem.
I'm in here 4 days a week. Staff comes to me during my regular office hours. What about this? What about this? I give general guidance going forward. I says, talk to Gary, talk to Stephen. What's the intent of this going forward? So a lot happens. And you are here almost all the time, too, unless we have appointments that have us outside the office.
Right.
Yes, okay.
I'm even thinking about bringing my cat to be in my office with me. I'm here so much.
Should I make a motion for
Yeah,
that?
do it.
Because I'm all in favor of that.
Oh, can I just say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
I like Mark's compromises. I think they're a good way to go, and I would direct staff to go ahead with those compromises. Finish it up, and either we vote on it now or just say yes with the compromises, craft the language, or whatever. So that's just a suggestion. I don't know where you're going with this, Commissioner Fisher, but I'd be okay with that. I don't know.
Oh,
You're going to
like
make a
where I'm at,
motion or whatever. I don't know.
I will go with whatever everybody else wants to do. I think
Sorry.
anything is fine. Really, our success lies in how we relate to one another, and that takes building trust and relationships. So we can have all the words we want right here, but it's going to be having those conversations, building that trust, building that relationship. And quite frankly, if we want to run a good county, we got to let the chair know what's going on, because whoever sits in that position, right now it's Chair Smith, that position needs to be able to know all the political moving parts, or else we do not function well. So,
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, so the other part I remembered that I had skipped my mind momentarily, I'm going to come back to, is you're bringing up on page 10 of 11, Chair.
I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
apologize.
So Chair, your point you brought up about page 10 of 11 about the adverse action. So the example I would use was the action we took in January of last year to censure Commissioner Scholl. And the conversations you and I had on the phone in that week prior to that Thursday was to allow some of us more time, myself included, Mr. Scholl included, and all of us included, to actually do the research and find out what these postings were about, talk to some of the people that may have been impacted and kind of get a better understanding. But we raced to that Thursday censorship. I don't know why we raced, but it seemed to be we had one position at one part of the day, and in the afternoon that position changed. And behind the scenes, there was a lot going on that I just simply didn't understand. So I agree with Commissioner Scholl's idea about not greater than 180 days, but the other reason this came up was, and I don't disagree with giving Commissioner Scholl his duties back or assignments back and so on, but there needs to be a structure in there, and this does it. 180 days, that's just simply, an idea.
Okay.
So I'm not opposed to changing it, to revisit that, because it can't go on in perpetuity. And I thought that was, frankly, the way that came about, there ought to, frankly, I would suggest adding language that says, that there be at least a 10-day period of time before action is taken on any kind of adverse action, to give everyone ample amount of time to research the issue and find out what it really is, and for that person actually to seek whatever advice that person can get. So I just want to say that I'm fine. I think these with what Martha said with Commissioner Scholl's. I think I can get there. We're all going to have to compromise to get this done. But I do want to go back. Certainly, I agree, Chair, that there are times when you got the clock running like we do now. We got 5 minutes before this is scheduled to get this done. We got to cut comment. It's reasonable to cut someone short. But last Wednesday, I was cut short within moments of the meeting started. And the meeting ended a half an hour earlier, and I pointed out that we had plenty of time, and yet the biggest decision the county made, I just thought that was an example where that explanation didn't fit. The other one I want to use as the best example of the agenda setting that is bothersome to me, and this came up Wednesday evening and weeks prior, was the NCPRD agenda. Fascinating story on all the iterations and how that came to be. I still don't understand how that happened. I'm the liaison. I don't expect any special rights or privileges, but I do have insight. The agenda came out. I don't know who put it together, but agenda came out, and then I was asked in writing in an email, what do I think? So, well, we didn't talk about this, we didn't talk about that. How much time do we have? Time, again, time of the meeting and a half. And I go, these are more pertinent, so I added my inputs. Some of those were used, some of those were not, but the time was cut short to an hour and a half. And here you have a district that's been struggling for 12 years since I've been here, has not met regularly, as all districts do, on a monthly basis. So we agreed to go to a quarterly meeting. I assumed that we would have a little bit more time to do the business meeting quarterly that we're not caught up on. So there's an example of maybe agenda setting that didn't go so well, and which I still don't understand. And again, there's too many irons in the fire there, but that's something I think we need some work on as an example. I
I'm
conclude my
prepared
comments
to
there,
answer
Chair.
that. I can prepare to answer that. The agenda items that came on that particular meeting was for BCC consideration, not NCPRD consideration. We had one person attend that meeting. We are doing this, like you say, Commissioner Savas, for the public. I don't hear any outcry from the public about our meeting agenda. I don't hear any outcry from the public regarding, I invited people to come. We had one person in attendance. We had 2 people on Zoom. So we're going to be looking again on how we conduct those NCPR meetings. We might have them just during the day, during regular business meetings, because frankly, that's a lot for staff to attend the evening meetings. I just think that it's incumbent upon, there's a lot of things thrown at me, and I can understand why we're discussing those particular items at NCPRD when it's for BCC consideration. I was advised to that by our staff, and so I listened to my staff on that, and that's how I make my decisions. And so I had to make a decision. I had to make a decision on a meeting agenda. And if you want to bring it back up, go through protocol, let me know, let Gary know. But Commissioner Savas, don't let items stew. I mean, I am feeling, and the look on your face today is so much anger.
I have no anger, Chair. I am calm as can be.
The look on your face, you're turning red, and you're looking at me, and you're poking me, and I'm just not feeling the love right now on this whole discussion. I am willing to make some concessions going forward. However, I will not accept some of the items in this document. Now, if we want to take any action against any commissioner, I am perfectly willing for the 7 to 10 days to evaluate. Now, if you remember, that item came up after I was elected chair for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Okay? The pressure from the entire state of Oregon pounded on top of me. I left it to a board decision. I brought forward for consideration for our board. Some of my board members were pushing me very hard. Some were not. If I had to do that again, Commissioner Savas, I would do it differently, because I've been chair for 1.5 years now. It was something that was not thrown at me, make a decision, when practically every elected official in Oregon went bonkers, and most all of our department heads signed on to that as well. I have to tell you, that was an untenable situation that I never want to find myself or any chair in again. That was awful. I wish it would have been done differently. And so when I started to talk to Mark Scholl, I came to my board members individually. We need to bring back his liaison duties. I got pushback. I'm going to tell you right now, commissioners, from all of you.
Oh, I don't think I did, didn't I?
Oh, yeah, that's what I remember. Let's bring him back, Well, he needs to do this, he needs to do that. I would go back to Commissioner Scholl. Commissioner Scholl, whatever, I'm doing fine. So, but I will say, when I was also sabotaged at the budget meeting from our budget committee members that wanted to take away his salary, I put my foot down on that. I had to run the meeting and make a decision at that time and in that moment instantly. And I did it, and I protected all your salaries as well. So don't think for 1 minute I'm out there cowboying it, thinking it's my agenda, when my utmost consideration is what's good for Clackamas County and good for the board members on moving forward. So, do I hear a motion today on this, or do we want to let it settle and then bring back another revision? I want to know what the commissioners
Chair,
want to do.
I move we direct.
Commissioner Savas, we are at 11:30. I reserve the right to run the meeting for time.
You asked for a motion.
Do I hear a motion?
That's what I was going to make.
Okay.
You asked for a motion, so I started to make a motion. And I just want to say one thing, Chair. Policy is policy. It's not personal. There's nothing personal here.
Well, I would
A lot of the
disagree.
policies we're discussing were crafted before any of us were on this commission. So that's what this is about. So I'm sorry that you're taking this personal. There is no personal intent here.
But you have
There's
brought up other
experiences
issues.
in policy that we could be crafting to do our work better and be respectful. So I don't think anyone is being slighted here. One other thing I want to quickly mention is that not only was the meeting for the NCPRD messed up, but the issue there was that it was supposed to happen at Concord and at a certain place, and that was changed, and then the link was not available for everyone to even get to the meeting. So I don't think it's incumbent upon us anyways to rely upon Outcry to set our agenda. We don't operate on that. So with that, I'm making the motion that we direct staff to take our comments today and come up with a clean document and for our review and bring it back in a timely and efficient manner.
Can you do that?
I'll second that for the sake of it's 11:30, okay? With Commissioner Scholl's compromises, how's that?
Okay.
Specific.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to make sure that we got Commissioner, all of our comments.
Okay.
Compromise, with the
Okay,
compromises.
I'm going to
Okay.
repeat the motion. Commissioner Savas has moved that we bring back a copy of these board orders with all the commissioners' edits and try to get that out so commissioners can review it a couple days in advance, please, if you can, Stephen.
Can do.
And Commissioner Schrader has seconded that motion. Commissioner Fisher, you had your light on?
Yeah, but I'm, okay.
You're done. Any other comments?
Nope.
Welcome
Okay.
to our world.
Okay, and we need to vote on this. Obviously, we've had a motion. Tony, please take the poll.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Absolutely. Okay. we're
That
gonna
would
do
be an
this.
aye.
That's an aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Why not?
I'm going to take that as an aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, staff,
Thank you.
for listening to this. Gary, what's up next?
Your next session is Oregon Ballot Measure 109. I can't pronounce it. Psilocybin, thank you. Nate Boderman, Assistant County Counsel, will present. And you're bringing a guest. You only have 30 minutes, so do as quickly as you can so the board can discuss. Nate.
Will do. Hello again, Commissioners. Nate Boderman, Assistant County Counsel. With me is Jack Stinson. He's interning in our office this summer, law student, and helped prepare much of these materials here. So the purpose of this session this morning is really twofold. First, we wanted to provide some background regarding Measure 109 and the timelines related to implementation by the Oregon Health Authority. Second, we also intend to cover those provisions in Measure 109 that allow local jurisdictions to refer an opt-out to the voters. The effect of which would be to really halt licensure by the Oregon Health Authority of either production facilities or service centers in a jurisdiction that votes for such an opt-out. So we do have quite a bit to cover in 30 minutes, and we really do need to get to the opt-out piece here during our session today. So let me just briefly jump into the first part, the background of Measure 109. Much of the material is summarized for you in the staff report, but I do want to highlight just a few things for you. As I alluded to earlier, the Oregon Health Authority is the state agency that's in charge of implementing the new program. Oregon Health Authority has set up a new division and are working on rulemaking, really to stand up a whole new licensing and compliance operation related to psilocybin to ensure that licensing can begin on January 2nd, 2023. So really we're 5 or 6 months out from that deadline here. The Oregon Psilocybin Advisory Board was created as part of Measure 109, the members of which are appointed by the governor and have been meeting and advising Oregon Health Authority on the background research into psilocybin, other issues like licensing, products, and training recommendations. Our own county health officer, Dr. Sarah Present, is an appointee on that committee. That's a governor-appointed committee. She was hoping to be able to join us here today, but actually had to be in the clinic. So if you do have any specific questions, I'll say she's offered to review and respond to those. She's been a great resource helping us pull together much of this information on short notice. And so if you do have any questions, make sure you let us know and we'll get those answers back to you timely. Oregon Health Authority has already adopted some rules, mostly around the manufacturing requirements, training standards, and product testing. Unfortunately, the remainder of the rules are not set to be adopted until the end of this year, December 2023, really right before OHA is planning to begin issuing licenses. So we'll see drafts of those rules, but likely not until September, which is really, again,
When?
likely not until September before we see drafts of those rules. which, puts local jurisdictions like ours in a little bit of a predicament in trying to figure out what additional regulations may be appropriate for, each of these individual communities, including ours. So, and finally, I just want to remind the commission that while there's a number of similarities between how psilocybin and cannabis were structured as far as the structure of the state regulations and the manner in which both psilocybin and cannabis have been, rolled out after being approved by the voters, there's some notable differences, right, that will cause the psilocybin program to look much different than what many of you experienced several years back when we were going through sort of that initial consideration of what regulations were appropriate for cannabis. So most notably, there's no personal use allowance with psilocybin. I want you to keep that in mind, or direct-to-consumer sales, right? So psilocybin must be administered under the supervision of a licensed facilitator in a licensed facility. And so I think that should, inform much of the regulation moving forward. And again, just something to keep at the top of your mind. I'm going to come up for air. This is a good time just to pause if you have any questions, because I'd really like to move on to the opt-out. If you
I
don't
do,
have any.
and would you please introduce the gentleman next to you?
Oh, I did. Jack Stinson. He's a legal intern in our office.
Hello, Jack.
And helped put together much of the materials. So.
What
Thank
school do
you.
you go to, Jack?
I'm at Lewis and Clark Law School.
Okay, all right, thank you. So, I've read through this, and this is extremely awkward and not well organized, in that the final adoptions for rules aren't till the end of this year, and yet if this board were to adopt this, we don't know what rules we're agreeing to or not. And there is an allowance for local jurisdiction to delay this for 2 years with a vote of the people. Correct. Now, you say that the draft rules could be made available in September, with final adoption the end of December. So does that mean that any jurisdiction that has objection to the draft rules can submit our opinions and have them changed possibly?
Yes. And so the timing of the OHA rulemaking would have some public listening sessions rolling out this month, and those would be based on concepts, right? The advisory board is going to be publishing some concepts, as I understand it. There'll be public listening sessions, opportunity for public participation. The Rules Advisory Committee is then set to meet in August, I believe, with the goal of producing draft rules in September, and those draft rules would be the actual language that could potentially be implemented. There's a participation component associated with Rules Advisory Committee, and then again, it would go through the process with final adoption being slated for December.
Okay, so we have legal counsel presenting this technical side, but we have not heard from public health. And I don't see how this board can make any decisions on this until we understand what this does, the health effects it has, how it will be administered. So in my mind, unless we have a public health expert in the audience willing to testify, it's too bad Dr. President isn't here, or maybe our public health director. I don't see that. Also, I was reading through the psilocybin. The Oregon Health Authority spells it differently.
Was it? Yeah.
So how come they can't rely on one spelling consistent through all of this is what I was noticing, but
Yeah,
Maybe-
good question. We ran into that with marijuana, cannabis, different.
yeah, I mean, they
different
have
terms
a
used.
header, and then in the body of their text, it's a different spelling. I mean, I don't know. I don't know much about this, to be honest with you, but I want to know more about this. And so with that in mind, we're going to listen to my fellow commissioners. Commissioner Savas, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with the point that Chair Smith made with regard to how can we go along with something if we really don't know what the final product is. And well done report. Thank you for your report. Read it through, makes a lot of sense. Had a lot of flashbacks and a lot of good memory of the cannabis regulations that we did and how complex that was. And I think it's important to point out that we can, as I understand it, your report, opt in on any of the 3 or 4 different two, and those 2 are?
It would be the manufacturer license or the service center licensure.
Okay, so we can't opt in or out on anything else?
Correct, I believe.
So even the option 2 of a 2-year or a permanent opt-out only opts out on the manufacturer and the,
Correct, correct. State law only allows us to opt out of 2 categories of licensure. There are the other license, there would be a facilitator license, the individual that would actually be administering. We can't opt out of that. Those are personal to the individual. Laboratory licenses, we have to allow those that are testing the product. And then, give me just a second here, maybe it's only 4 categories.
yep. I would encourage anyone that's listening to read through Appendix C of the report. There are a lot of things that gave me a lot of pause with the fact that this board of experts of different fields chiming in saying, this is preliminary. They're really, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, needs a lot more work, review, study, analysis, and so forth. So there's no, everything says the legislation or whatnot is ahead of the science, so to speak, and all the studies and so forth. So I'm very concerned about that. I see a lot of red flags. I came here prepared to say that I'm going to hold off on a lot of my comments about this, including the mental health challenges we have in this state, until the hearing. But I'm here to support a hearing of, frankly, either the option of the two-year pause or the other opt-out. One of those two. I haven't made up my mind there yet.
Commissioner Scholl.
Yes, on your briefing notes this morning, attachment A, can you define the qualifications a facilitator will need to be licensed by the state? Does that mean they're a psychiatric professional?
Good question, Jack. Do you want to chime in here?
Yeah, the answer to that is no. You do not have to have any sort of official medical or therapist type of licensure. They've actually limited the type of like the education that you can require prior to the training that they kind of mandate, and that's high school education is the most you can mandate. You can't mandate that someone has either a bachelor's, an associate's degree, or anything higher than that. But they are mandating training, and that is part of the few administrative rules they have already passed. And so right now the training is a minimum of 120 hours of kind of classroom, lecture, education, and then 40 hours of practical experience education, where 30 of them have to be actually in either licensed service centers where you're seeing other people administer, or working with someone who's already licensed to learn kind of the trade, kind of like a study program that is going to be put out specifically for psilocybin. But there's no requirement that you have to be any sort of medical professional prior, and that the most that anyone can require is a high school education prior to the training.
That's interesting. The benefit that some people hope to see out of legalizing psilocybin is to modify things like depression and other mental issues. And I would think that somebody who's going to be effective at helping somebody by administering psilocybin would have to be very well educated in terms of the drug's effects and how to help a client overcome things like depression, et cetera. So my concern is that 120 hours of training, what's that going to really produce when a psychiatrist is in school for years? So that's just something to think about.
And it may be the case that the rulemaking, the second part of the rulemaking that's pending clarifies some of that and provides more detail around what those licenses will entail, and some of the...
When does the second part of rulemaking happen?
That's the finalized rules will be done in December.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we have the initial, and it's, okay. See, that's confusing to me, but Commissioner Savas, you're up.
Yeah, I have a question, and to start out with this. As I understand it, Measure 110 does not specifically identify this particular chemical, if you will. Correct?
Well, Measure 109, just to clarify that.
Yeah, I know this is
But-
109, but I'm asking about 110. Specifically asked about 110, which is the one.
Decriminalization, was that? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I've said this before, I'll say it again. I think the voters ought to repeal it and I'm hoping that 110 that is. So I'm kind of concerned the way 110 came about, that 109 did as well, is that the idea is ahead of the science. I do buy in that there are people that can benefit from this treatment. But from talking to people in this industry a little bit, I got more folks, and actually having experiences with people in this industry, and noting last year's report by the state in a Zoom meeting or whatever it was, that the state of Oregon has 553 vacancies in mental health provision in the state. 500, and something like this is something that has to be prescribed. I find it striking that the word prescription or prescribed is not in any of this as far as the folks. It has been described to me that when you give someone a hallucinogenic, that it's advisable to have them there for a full day, a couple, 3 hours to stabilize, and then have them take the medication or the prescription and then monitor them for 4 or 5 hours before you release them. If you want to go and get yourself scared, just type in mushrooms or psilocybin and comma murders, and you'll see a lot of people that lose their mind. So this is not just like fentanyl, where a person takes it and they go crazy. This is about one person takes it and they die. This here is they affect other people if they overdose on it. And that's the concern, or they don't have the right prescription. I just don't think that whoever issues this stuff, whether they got 120 hours of training or not, the fact that they're certified and not licensed is problematic to me.
It's problematic to me. Now, Gary, moving forward with this, we have not heard from our public health officials. That's a glaring departure of any decision-making today. But what I would like to do, unless there's huge objection from my board, is we schedule a public hearing. And at that time, we have one of two decisions to make. We either adopt rules that we don't know what they're going to say yet, or we put it to the voters that we vote for a 2-year delay in Clackamas County if voters want to approve that. Those are the two options before us, so we will need to set time away on some of those blank days on the green sheet that we have intentionally reserved because we're managing the agenda. Commissioner Fisher.
So first of all, Chair Smith, I agree with your procedural approach to this, but just a couple substantive questions that I have that maybe Nate or Jake can answer. An excellent job with the materials, Jake, really. Or is it Jack?
It's Jack.
Sorry.
No worries.
I should have remembered that because I have a grandson named Jack, but for some reason I just wanted to call you Jake.
It's
So,
close.
Jack, thank you. The part that I'm curious about, and you may not know the answer to this, but there is a zoning setback of 1,000 feet away from a school. Do you happen to know the public policy rationale for that addition to the measure?
So I'll chime in here, Jack, if you want to jump in, feel free. But much of Measure 109, I understand, was really borrowed heavily from the original marijuana cannabis ballot measure. And that 1,000 feet appeared in the original cannabis ballot measure as it pertained to the storefronts, I forget the technical name, but the
Retail?
dispensaries, right? And so those couldn't be 1,000 feet within a school. We actually took the steps to redefine, other sensitive uses. But I suspect it's a carryover, but the theory is the same, right? That there is some public policy, behind distancing these from schools or treatment centers or other, sensitive type uses, or what you might characterize as sensitive uses. That's actually directly from Measure 109. Again, with cannabis, county and other jurisdictions took steps to define that even further and to put our own individual spins on it.
Yeah, and further, they have passed, part of the kind of rules that they already have laid out is there is things where you can't have any of the product look like, toys or cars or action figures. It's stuff that, something that would be attractive to kids. There's certain limitations on like the shapes and forms it can take. So kind of like a public policy where they're, trying to address like a public fear that kids are going to either mistakenly, get a hold of something or be allured, which is interesting because it is required to be taken in these facilities and be monitored. But so it definitely seems to be borrowed heavily from kind of the cannabis, where it seems to be more kind of relevant, but it seems to be the public policy of, making it or not making it attractive to the youth.
Okay, and my next question, I'm still a little fuzzy on the timing. So Oregon Health Authority is coming up with the rules. They're going to be, some of the rules, or all of the rules, we'll be able to review at the end of September. Is that what I understand?
Correct.
But in the meantime, we have to make a decision if we want to ask to put it on the ballot for, is that just because of the November ballot date? Or
It's,
what?
yeah, it's the timing, it's, you know, the timing with which Oregon Health Authority was able to process the rulemaking, right? And so, yes, you are effectively being asked prior to middle of August to decide whether to refer an opt-out of some shape or form to the voters, not knowing what the state regulations will be. And so that's why we are seeing some jurisdictions contemplate, you know, sort of a limited duration opt-out, right, to allow, you know, a 2-year time frame for the rules to get finalized, to see how the program is implemented in other jurisdictions, reserving the right then to consider whether a full opt-out is appropriate or whether other time, place, and manner regulations, you know, could fill that gap.
Okay, and then my last question, our Public Health Council, have they been briefed on this or worked on this? Or our Public Health Authority, I guess. What is the name of our Public Health Council?
Yeah, so.
Have they been briefed? Do they have input for us as
That-
our
that-
advisory group?
Yeah, so that's my impression. We were hoping that Dr. President would be able to join us today, but she wasn't able to. And so, again, she's got an incredible amount of background. I assume she's working with our public health folks. But given the timing of all this, we really needed to bring the opt-out question to you sooner than later. That doesn't mean that we can't, in the interim, you know, have some questions answered. We tried to answer some questions that we had already received. If you have other questions, by all means, let us know. We will get you the answers to those. If you want a formal session or in the context of like a first reading to have public health provide a report to you, let's do that as well.
Okay, we're running short on time. Commissioner Schrader is up next.
So Gary, assuming that we move forward with this in 2 years, isn't this going to put pressure on our planning folks? Because they're going to have to go through the same planning process, time, place, manner, with all those kinds of hearings of how we're going to manage that in this county. And also, it's not called an agricultural crop, so it cannot be grown in rural areas. It has to be done in, you know, I mean, all of those kinds of decisions and information will put probably some of the planning things that we already have underway with our planning staff will probably have to be put aside again, similar to what happened during the marijuana adoption of.
Yes, that is true. Another unfunded mandate, Commissioners. Yes.
Okay, so Gary, Dr. President needs to submit her research background information to us 1 week prior, because we need to study it. I need to study it to understand this.
So much of that report was included in your materials, the rapid evidence review that was adopted as
And I
part.
see some of that. There's more out there.
Sure.
There's
Sure.
more out there. They have some initial studies that have come back. And what I want to see is a test of time, of years of evidence that this works. And I read through this and saw the side effects and the possibility of the anomalies and/or / diseases that can be cured by this, which all of those listed abnormalities and / diseases can be cured by a host of other drugs and therapies available on the marketplace today that are legal. So I'm having a real problem with putting this out for people who've had minimal training based on anecdotal evidence of a couple of studies that have happened recently. They were probably hurried up in anticipation that this would pass the voters. We have a problem in this county and in this state of overuse of drugs, of addiction to drugs, and here we are again. It's the county governments who are the feet on the ground to try to solve these problems of yet another unfunded bad policy, in my opinion, totally bad policy. And then we have an outrage from the public. Commissioners, why aren't you doing more? Well, we're doing what we can here, and this is not a good situation. Commissioner Savas, you're up.
Yeah, I agree with those points for the most part. Yeah, it's a shame. We're last in the country of mental health provision and drug alcohol treatment. And again, I see an upside that, you know, there is some science or some some data that shows that there are some people that benefit from that. So with that in mind, I'm going to keep my mind open. But I think how it's administered and how it's prescribed is more important to me. And also how it's manufactured as well, as far as it being a pure item. You know, we have the FDA and all these other things that approve all these drugs and so forth that jump through leaps and bounds, and it's no surprise this is not federally approved. So that said, I think one other thing I wanted to build on, whether it's, Dr. Present, but I would like to have and be able to take questions. If we can find someone who'd be willing, a professional, licensed
Expert?
psychiatrist expert with all the PhD, with all, I need to I almost need like a dictionary to find out all the different categories of certification and licensing of mental health professionals, because there's just a lot of acronyms and so forth I don't really understand. But I want to make sure we get the right person that can speak to this the best, who is, obviously is as least biased as possible, that has some expertise with this. But dealing with folks that have been, seeking mental health and trying to help them, I have definitely learned that there's a lot of tools out there, there's a lot of medications out there that do work. And our issue is the service providers shortage, whether it's for the public or for the government, and the 553 I mentioned earlier, that's the biggest issue, not having the tools of the drugs in play. So to that point, I think we need to keep on pressing hard for more dollars in this state to get out of last place in the nation for mental health provision and step up our game.
Thank you for that. Any further comments from commissioners? Gary, do you have a clear direction from this board?
Yes, what I'm hearing is to go ahead and schedule a first public hearing, but not have a specific outcome yet until you hear from the public. Have Dr. President and our public health staff advise and give you feedback, perhaps bring in some professional folks as well. And then at that first hearing, then you can then guide us what.
Yeah, we have a good discussion on that. Also, like Commissioner Savas and I thought of this, also some expert in the field, but I don't know. Also, we need to know exactly what other counties are doing and contemplating. And if they're having hearings on this, who in the other counties are they relying on for their information?
Yes.
Maybe we can piggyback on some of that. We don't have to recreate the wheel on everything. Nate.
Yeah, as far as what other counties are doing, I'll just briefly add that Lynn County and Coos County are the only counties that I am aware of that are moving forward with an opt-out now. That said, given the timing of all this, you'll see or hear about other counties following here in the next week or two. I reached out to the
I believe Yamhill County is. I've
Okay.
heard commissioners have been reaching out to me. I believe Yamhill County is, and I think some of these county commissioners, as we know them, they're faced with the same conundrum as
Problems
we
we're
are.
having.
Why approve something, and it's going to be a bad effect to the services we can provide? Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if our timing issue is a ballot timing issue, and do we have the option of deciding to opt out for the May ballot?
We don't. State law only allows us to put the opt-out on the general election, which is
So could we do it for the next November ballot?
November.
Only
in
this
even-
November?
November in even-numbered years.
Oh, my gosh, okay.
There you go. Nice try. I like your idea.
Well, I'm just trying to see what flexibility we have here.
Okay, I think that's it. Anything else before the
So
board?
just,
Nate?
just to get clarity, the first reading that we'll bring before you is that for a 2-year limited duration, opt-out, a full permanent opt-out. If we can get a way to have you consider both, maybe we can do that, but I didn't have any sort of guidance. as
Yeah,
far as
well,
what
I
flavor.
said both. Be prepared for both. I'm all for a 2-year opt-out, and I don't even have all the medical information here because this is not a proven technology, in my opinion. I think a lot of it's anecdotal. And this needs to be science-based. This needs to be medically based, and not just a couple studies that happened last year, even though they're very in-depth. I'm, for one, how many times has the FDA approved a drug in America, only to find out it killed people, or it had adverse effects and it was taken off the market? So that's what I'm concerned about. Gary?
So I want to clarify with Nate, so the board can schedule a first public hearing without a specific outcome?
Well,
in
what
mind.
it'll probably look like is actually 2 separate ordinances for first reading, and then if if you express a preference for one over the other, then we'll just cancel the
Got it.
other.
So I'll
Okay,
have
we're
both
going to
prepared.
adjourn. Any questions from board members or Gary or I, don't be afraid to reach out. Without any further business before this board today, we are adjourned.